So let us start. हमने yesterday पढ़ा है degrees of elasticity of demand. उसमें हमने 5 degrees डिस्कस किए हैं. Elastic, high elastic, inelastic, unit elastic, perfectly inelastic and perfectly elastic. So these were 5 degrees of elasticity of demand. आज हम डिस्कस करेंगे what are the factors which affect the elasticity of demand. Factors which affect the elasticity of demand. Or these are also called determinants of elasticity of demand. जो elasticity determine करती है, determinants of elasticity of demand. Determinants of elasticity of demand. You write down. वो कौन से factors हैं जो elasticity को determine करते हैं, चेंज करते हैं, कम करते हैं या ज्यादा रखते हैं. किसी चीज की इलास्टिक क्यों ज्यादा है, इट इज ड्यू टू सम फैक्टर्स. किसी चीज की इलास्टिक क्यों कम है, इट इज ड्यू टू सम फैक्टर्स. So likewise we have discussed the factors which affect the demand of a commodity. जिस तरह हमने demand के factors पढ़े हैं जिनको हम कहते हैं ये determinants of demand. इसी तरह elasticity of demand के भी factors हैं जो इलास्टिक को डिटरमाइन करते हैं. किसी चीज की इलास्टिक क्यों ज्यादा है, क्यों कम है. There are some factors responsible for that. So you write down the answer. The elasticity of demand of a good depends upon so many factors. These are added under. The elasticity of demand of a good depends upon some factors. Depends upon several factors. These are as. So कौन कौन से फैक्टर्स हैं जो किसी चीज की इलास्टिसिटी कम रखती है या ज्यादा रखती है. We call this, sometimes we say that this good has high elasticity. Why it has high elasticity? There can be some factors responsible for it. कोई फैक्टर उसके पीछे हो सकता है. हम किसी चीज को कहते हैं कि इसकी इलास्टिसिटी बहुत कम है, it is inelastic product. That means there can be some factors. There can be some. उन factors को हमें discuss करना है. What are the factors which determine the elasticity of demand of a good? Number first is availability of substitutes.
सर यहाँ पे क्या है? Depends upon.
Depends upon several factors. These are as under several factors. Number first factor is availability of substitutes. Availability of substitutes. अगर किसी चीज के substitutes ज्यादा available है market, if a good has high number of substitutes available in the market or whose substitutes are easily available in the market, the elasticity of demand for such products is high. And for instead of that, if some products have few substitutes or no substitute available in the market, such products have inelastic supply. So if a product have high number of substitutes available in the market, or if close substitutes are easily available for a product, अगर किसी चीज के सब्स्टिट्यूट्स इजीली अवेलेबल मार्केट में है. So the elasticity for such products is high. Elasticity for such products or such goods is very high. उनकी elasticity बहुत high है. In controversy to other products, instead of other products, if on the other hand, the elasticity for such products is less or inelastic, whose substitutes are not easily available, or which have no substitutes. For those goods which have no substitutes, their elasticity of demand is inelastic. And for such products who has less substitutes available in the market, the elasticity for such products is less. Now full stop of डालिए. On the other hand, the elasticity for such products is less, whose substitutes are not easily available in the market. जिन प्रोडक्ट्स के सब्स्टिट्यूट्स बहुत कम अवेलेबल है या नहीं अवेलेबल है, उनकी इलास्टिसिटी बहुत कम होगी, और जिनके सब्स्टिट्यूट्स इजीली अवेलेबल है, उनकी इलास्टिसिटी हाई होगी. They are high elastic products. Number next is nature of the good. चीज किस तरह, प्रोडक्ट किस तरह है. Nature of the good. The elasticity of demand differs from one good to another. ये differ करता है. Yes. The elasticity of demand differs from one good to another good. The elasticity of demand differs from one good to another. Why? क्या है इसमें, क्या मसला है? For necessities, the elasticity of demand is inelastic. For comforts and luxuries, it is high elastic. So we have different kinds of products which we are using or consuming in our day-to-day life. For example, we consume necessities, we consume comforts, luxuries, etc. For necessities, the elasticity of demand is less or inelastic. The elasticity is inelastic. बहुत कम है. उनकी इलास्टिसिटी बहुत कम है. अगर उनके प्राइस में बहुत ज्यादा चेंज आती है, उनके डिमांड में उतनी ज्यादा चेंज नहीं आती है. For comforts and luxuries, the elasticity is high. So it depends upon the nature of the good. चीज कैसा है, प्रोडक्ट कैसा है, उसका इस्तेमाल कैसा है. तो अगर नेसेसिटी है तो वो लोगों को खरीदना ही खरीदना है. अगर उसके प्राइसेस मार्केट में ज्यादा हो जाएगी तो उसकी डिमांड कम नहीं होती है. That is why elasticity of demand is less. इसी तरह
The elasticity of demand
differs from one good to another good. For necessities, the elasticity is inelastic, and for comforts and luxuries, the elasticity is high. थर्ड फैक्टर है proportion of expenditure spent on a good. Third one is proportion of expenditure spent on a good. 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 कितना हम एक्सपेंडिचर किसी चीज पे करते हैं उन चीजों पे. Yes. Yes.
Necessity, the elasticity is
For necessities and comforts. For necessities, the
the
elasticity.
necessity, the elastic
For necessities, the elasticity is inelastic.
is the
कहाँ है?
is inelastic.
The necessities, for necessities, the elasticity is inelastic. Inelastic हो गई less elastic, कम elastic है. For comforts and luxuries, the elasticity is high elastic. The elasticity is high. खत्म नहीं किया ये. Proportion of expenditure spent. If the amount spent on a product is very small from total income, the product can be inelastic. So those products on which high proportion of our income is spent are the products or for the goods on which consumers spend high portion of their income. For the products on which consumers spend high portion of their income, the elasticity of such products is high. The products on which consumers spend small amount from their income. The elasticity for such products is low or they are inelastic. जिन प्रोडक्ट्स पे हम ज्यादा इनकम स्पेंड करते हैं, the products on which we spend more and more income, high part of income, the products on which we spend large part of our income, high proportion of our income, elasticity for such products is very high. They are highly elastic. And those products on which we spend less income, small amount of our income, less proportion of our income, the elasticity for such products is low or such products are inelastic. So it depends upon the consumers on which they spend their income. So that is why we say for comforts and luxuries, we spend high part of our income. That is why their elasticity of demand is high. And for necessities, for the goods which we use for sustenance, like food, like rice, wheat, sugar, atta, milk, salt, etc., the elasticity of such products is very less. Fourth one is habits. if a consumer becomes habitual for a commodity, the demand for such products, those commodities which make a consumer habitual, or such products whose for whose the consumers become habitual, the elasticity of such products is inelastic. Those products or those goods which make consumers habitual, the elasticity for such goods, elasticity for such goods is, the elasticity of such goods, elasticity for such goods is inelastic or less elastic. So if a consumer or consumers become habitual for a commodity, the demand for such goods will be inelastic. For example, cigarettes, liquor, sharab, wine, etc. So elasticity for such products is inelastic. इनकी elasticity बहुत कम है because people cannot avoid it. People cannot decrease their consumption if their price changes, if their price increases. They cannot decrease their consumption if their price increases. If they cannot even decrease their consumption if their price decreases. Increases or decreases, their demand remains the same. So that is why we call it is inelastic. It is inelastic. Number 5 is joint demand. Joint demand, as we know, it is that demand when commodities are demanded jointly for one use, for a particular purpose. But they are demanded when we demand 2 or 3 goods or 4 goods jointly to make one good, to satisfy one want. So if such commodities which are demanded jointly, the demand for such goods is inelastic because they affect such others' demand. So for those commodities which are demanded jointly or used jointly, like car and petrol. इसी तरह ball, bat, wickets, etc. The elasticity of demand for such goods is elastic. The elasticity of such goods is elastic, or we can say high elastic. The elasticity of demand is high, or they are high elastic products. Sorry. They are inelastic. The elasticity for such goods is inelastic or less elastic, not high elastic, inelastic or less elastic. So such goods which are demanded jointly for one purpose, if their price changes, their demand changes least or very less. So such goods are inelastic, have inelastic demand. Then we have the price level. The demand for those goods which are very costly and very cheap or inelastic products. The very costly products are demanded by rich people, but very cheap products are demanded by very poor people. That is why their demand does not change if their prices change. So this is very interesting. The price level of the commodities. Those commodities which are very costly and those commodities which are very cheap, the demand for these commodities is inelastic. Very interesting. Because highly costly products are demanded by very rich people and very cheap products are demanded by very poor people. Price level of products. Price level of products. Products. Price level of products. Products. The sixth one. So those goods which are very costly. So those goods which are very costly and those goods which are very cheaper. Very cheaper have inelastic demand. Inelastic demand. Because why? Because the very costly products are purchased by very rich people. Very rich people and very cheap products. Products are demanded by very poor people who does not change their demand when
Those goods which are very
cheap. Those goods which are very cheap have inelastic demand. Those goods which are very costly and those goods which are very cheap have inelastic demand. The very costly products are purchased by very rich people and very cheap products are demanded by very poor people who does not change their demand when their price changes. So these are extreme goods. The goods purchased by highly rich people and the goods purchased by very poor people. Their demand does not change when their price slightly changes. Their demand affects very least. So this is the sixth factor. Thus, we have discussed all the factors which affect the elasticity of demand of a good. Number first was availability of substitutes. Number second was nature of goods, proportion of income spent. Number fourth is habits, joint demand, and price level. So these are the factors which affect the elasticity of demand. Now, next day, tomorrow, inshallah, we will discuss the importance or uses of elasticity of demand. Thank you very much. Or quick question?
no, sir.
Thank you.